You're going to edit a lot of this, right?
Yes, don't worry.
Am I supposed to be looking at you? Ready? I'm Casey Ketterhagen, lead stylist on the new 2012 Softail Slim. Some of the cues I go through, some of the cues that tie it back to the old, the old 40s and 50s FLs, ELs, things like that are, to me a bike is all about proportion, and if it's not only bikes about proportion, it's everything in general. If you're looking at early hot rods, early customs, it's all about the proportion and how the bike looks and how everything plays together. So with this bike in particular, one of the things I tried to do was get the bike back narrow again in the back, so that the motor looked proportionately big, looks big in the frame. Over the years, I think Softails have grown to the point where everything else got big around the motor, but the motor stayed the same size. With this bike, I'm trying to really look back at historical bikes and try to get that proportion back dialed into where they were in the, in the 40s and 50s. And you'll see retro cues throughout the bike that tie it back to that era. For one, was being this kind of handlebar with a crossbar. The early Harleys, they were called Hollywood handlebars, and that was an aftermarket bar. I'm not really too sure on the whole history, but I think it was a bar that allowed people to put accessories, attach accessories to it. A lot of the early, police bikes and stuff like that, they'd attach lights and different types of things, but that crossbar was basically the same diameter as this bar, which on this one was inspired by more of like a dirt bike bar, or a BMX, even like a 90s BMX bar, just to give you a different look from a rider's perspective. Some of the other cues that date back to retro are kind of this cat-eye style gate, this cat-eye style console. This isn't a new part for us, but it's a part that fits really well on this bike. A real minimal tank strap is new, with kind of formed shape, real simple and clean, and that brings your eye right to the seat, which is the same texture on the outside. The inner panel of the seat is reminiscent of an early Bates style tuck and roll type of seat. It just gives it a really custom look. For an OE seat, it really looks custom. The biggest part of the bike for me, paint-wise, is usually the tank. That's the billboard of the bike here. Here you have this forged aluminum medallion on the tank, on the sweet spot of the tank. Real simple. And the idea behind this bike being that way is it's kind of a really clean, simple canvas where you could take either way. You could, it's really minimal right now, but you could go to the opposite and add a lot of P&A parts, or you could actually strip more parts off it. I wanted to keep the bike really pure and all just, about hardware. You see all the mechanical stuff. I mean, that's pretty common on Harleys and motorcycles in general, is the mechanicals are all visual, so those all have to play together in harmony with all the other pieces around it. There's a view, it's called something, I can't think of it right now. You know what it's called?
Still rolling.
The name Slim is derived out more than likely because of the slim and narrowness of the rear end. Bikes back in the day were narrow, and the motor and the primary were the predominant features, and the fender in direct proportion to the tank. I'm going to talk about proportions again, but direct proportion to the tank, the biggest amount of paint is usually on the tank, and that tapered line brings you back into this slim rear fender and slim rear end. Together, all the proportions really kind of make the 2012 Softail Slim a simple, small, easy, nimble bike to ride.
Wow, what we have here is a 1941 Harley Davidson EL Knucklehead. This motorcycle was restored early 1990. Been sitting in a museum at a Harley shop. It's only got about 10-15 miles on this motor. It's been cleaned up, polished up a little bit, and tuned. Pretty correct motorcycle. She's a beauty. It's not quite AMCA perfect, but boy, is it show perfect. Look at that. It's just beautiful. Maybe a little too much bling for a purist with the red, but it is what it is. Matching numbers. I'm going to give it a full choke. I'm going to turn my fuel on. It's cold. Fuel's up. And I'm going to turn my camera over to my partner. And we'll see if we can get this thing to fire. It's absolutely cold. Kicks. Get this up where it belongs. Set half. Ignition. Quarter throttle.
My name is Frank Savage, and I've been working with Harley Davidson and the Willie G. Davidson Design Studio for 16 years now. Currently, I'm a manager and take care of the XL and XR platform.
Hi, I'm Paul Martin. I'm the manager of styling graphics in the styling department. I've been with Harley Davidson for a little over 9 years, and I've worked on the graphics on this motorcycle. It was like a job that came into my old shop.
Nice. We have a beautiful new motorcycle to introduce to you. It is the 72 Sportster chopper with a 2.2 peanut gas tank on it. We actually got the idea for this bike probably about 6 years ago. We produced a chopper style bike with Sportster engine, low apes, and we actually took the mufflers off it and just had it there for the executives to take test rides. And everybody loved the kind of laid-back feel. When you sat on it, you just wanted to keep riding off into the sunset. Just completely puts you at ease. You don't want to stop. It's something you got to experience. At the time, we just had a regular walnut tank on the bike. And lo and behold, when the 48 was launched, we had the 2.2 peanut tank to work with, and we were just totally stoked that we had the smaller tank to work with. And kind of what you're looking at now is the final evolution of that bike we rode in the desert about 6 years ago, and we're really proud of it and look forward to putting more miles on it. All right, so a lot of the questions us designers get at Harley Davidson is, where's the inspiration for this bike come? Where do you get your ideas? And it's obviously the inspiration for this bike came from choppers of the mid-60s to 70s, a really stripped down look. This is one of the narrowest glide front ends we have in our portfolio today, and it really has a kind of almost a bicycle feel to it. And even today we see customizers stripping their bikes down in the West Coast and Japan to get a really narrow bike, small tank, and prominent engine. After that, we've defined the geometry. We get the 2.2 peanut tank, the trim fender. We're like, okay, take it to the graphics department, and we work with Paulie to come up with some era period graphics. We got Paul Martin here that is the expert in graphics, and I was asking him, where does the style of paint come from, and when did Candy Custom and Hard Candy Custom, we call it, and flake and paint and these pinstriping things, what was the origin of that stuff, and where did it come from, Paulie?
Well, in the 60s is kind of when the big flake really kind of started to take off, and we started seeing more and more of this coming back around, and on this particular project, when we chose this motorcycle to put, as the palette for Big Flake, I got excited because it just put me right back to when I was growing up in, the Chicago suburbs and seeing all this stuff coming from the West Coast, and which included like these Tommy the Greek style teardrops and the scallops that are kind of reminiscent of a Larry Watson paint job, and the pinstriping and all that. I just really got stoked about doing that job.
That's sweet. So you're kind of taking what you've learned from history, some of the guys before you, adding their flair, but then mixing in your designs to make it something unique.
Yeah, absolutely. This project was, it wasn't much different than if, you rolled into my shop and wanted to do something, a cool paint job on it. And, with the Big Flake, you would do some graphics that were not trying to compete with that, but, highlight the shapes.
Right. See, we went back to a more traditional round air cleaner, and it frees up space on either side of the V to expose the push rod tubes and really showcase the engine and give a classic appeal to the 72. We've also given the cases, the heads, and the cylinders gray paint. It's a nice accentuation with the chrome. This bike, you see it, and it looks like it just pulled into a ride-in show, and we're offering this right from the factory. So big chrome, looking good. We've also added white wall front and rear, which adds to a nostalgic feel, lightens up the bike visually also. One of the favorite parts of the design process for me is seeing the hardware that we as a team worked on going down the road. And this one's going to be no exception. Seeing this beautiful bike drive off into the sunset with a customer on it, it's going to be very fulfilling.
Man, when I do a job like this in the shop, I just couldn't wait till the customer come and get it. It was just really exciting. I can't wait to see this on the street.